Hi guys, welcome to the Extra Talk. Today we have José de la Verde. He's been here before. He's our financial guru, as I said last time, but he is actually also an ex. José, last time we spoke, you were in the Netherlands. I don't think you're in the Netherlands right now.
No, I'm too sweaty at the moment to be in the Netherlands. No, I'm actually in Costa Rica on the Caribbean side. So yeah, I moved here and yeah.
You basically ran away from Ajax problems. You ran away from the Ajax problems.
I tried a little bit, but even though I'm on the other side of the ocean, I still feel it here. So yeah.
It looks awesome, like all seriousness, it looks very nice. I hope you're having a good time there. We brought you in, of course, because we have some questions. Ajax posted their 2022-2023 annual figures a little bit over 2 weeks ago. And we just found the time a little bit to not think about football for a minute and ask you, let's talk about finance. Although it's correlated, let's just talk about finance a little bit and just distract ourselves from what's going on the pitch. José, let me ask you the first question, and then, of course, Sahbi can jump in at any time. How are we doing?
Financially, actually quite well. I think in general, Ajax had a good financial year. Quite a good financial year, actually, maybe even better than expected. And also for this season, and maybe a little bit ahead, it's not too bad. Financially, Ajax is pretty healthy and doing pretty well.
And if you compare that with last annual figures, I mean, did we perform better or worse in comparison?
Actually, yeah, you can say a little bit better. Maybe to start off, I mean, all numbers, of course, need some context. And I think always it's important for all those numbers to get a little bit of a sense of what they mean, sort of say, how to connect the dots. So I would say to get the basics of the financial numbers, there are 5 key elements to it. And those are elements that you see a lot of the media as well. And also, those are the main figures that they put in their yearly report. So first up, that's revenue. I think that's sort of obvious. That's all of the money that comes in. But it's important to realize that excluding the transfers, right? So all of the money that comes in, so tickets, partnerships or sponsoring, merchandise, TV money, business seats, stuff like that. And also the European money that comes in from the UEFA when you play in Champions League or Europa League. So that's revenue, that's important. Then you get costs, of course, it speaks for itself as well. All the money out. And again, this is excluding the transfers. So this mainly salary, that's with all football clubs, and Ajax is no exception, mainly that's salary that's being paid to the players, but also to the staff. And maybe on a side note, how many employees do you think Ajax has? Maybe you know, by the way, but
I should know this.
Around
100, more than 100. 100.
I think more 400, right? 400, 500 maybe?
Yeah, Sabi, you're right. Yeah, so it's almost 450 full-time equivalents. So it's a big business. And so, yes, players get most of the salary, but also a lot of other people in the company that need salary and get salary. So salary is main cost, but also costs from matches, the rent of the stadium is something Ajax has to pay for, and then some other costs, maybe travel, administration, stuff like that. So you have revenue, you have cost. If you get the difference between those two, you get the operational result. And that's an important one in football. So that's the profit or loss that you have before transfers, right? This is all excluding transfer balance. So most clubs, and especially Dutch clubs and also internationally, they count on a loss there. So they say, all right, I have more costs than I get revenue. And so they count on their transfers to make profit in the end. So that's operational result. Fourth one that's important is transfer balance. So this is where amortization and transfer results come into play. We won't say the word amortization as much as last time. That's the transfers coming in, right? So the amount you pay, the transfer fee that you pay is divided over the years of the contract. And if you count all of those individuals per year up, you get your amortization for that year. So the transfer balance is the difference between the amortization and the transfer result. And the transfer result is what you are left with in the end from all the sales. So that's not the gross number. So that's not like if you go to transfer market and you look up how much the transfer fees have been paid for Ajax players, but that's a different number. That's a little bit lower. A lot goes to third parties, for example, but also to some other stuff. So that's the transfer balance. And then finally, you get the net result. So if you have the operational result and you get there the transfer balance together, then you get a net result afterwards. So those are the basics. So if you look at those numbers for Ajax and compare them with that, because that was your question, Sabi. So the revenue, so money in went up. It's now 196 million, so almost 200 million. It was only higher once before. That was in the year 18-19. Of course, let's remember that year a lot. That's good for the vibes. So then it was 199, almost 200 then. So it went up with 7 million. And maybe you can remember, Van der Sar and Overmars talking, Ajax needs to grow its revenue to 150 million and maybe even more. And they're close to 200 at the moment. So that's actually going pretty well. And if you compare that maybe to Europe, maybe that's a good comparison. That's top 25-ish, right? So a lot of Premier League clubs, of course, are above that and all the other leagues. The Ajax is coming close to, top 30, top 25-ish in Europe when it comes to revenue. And if you compare it to PSV and Feyenoord, they both have had last year about 100 million revenue. So just over half of Ajax. So also in that respect, Ajax is still a lot bigger than those two clubs financially.
I have a few questions, if that's
sure,
okay.
Sure.
Jose, first of all, if you look at the books, right? If you look at the results, you mentioned the expenses side, and you said salary is a huge component, almost entirely or a big chunk. But also you said the salary that you see there, it's also the staff, so it's not only the players. Does Ajax reports it as a whole, or is there a distinction between players and staff? So you know how many of the expenses, the cost, the salary, in that sense, is made up of players.
They report about that. So this year, the salary total for Ajax was 99 million, right? But that's all personnel. 64 million of that was to players, and 15 million was for staff, so technical staff, medical staff, stuff like that. But that's all trainers, right? So in all levels, etc. So they do report on that, but that's sort of the figures.
Sabi, you wanted to say something?
No, just maybe to look a little bit further. The aim was for this coming season is to lower the salary costs, which happened with Tadic leaving, Klaassen, and so on. But we also gonna reduce a lot in income from Europe because we don't play any Champions League. Do you see that it's? I mean, it's difficult for you to know because you don't have the exact figures. But do you expect something like this season, like this year result, or do you expect a very much that it's going down in terms of our revenue? Because the expenses are low, you might expect a large chunk of net income, operational income. But what are your expectations on that?
Yeah, interesting question, because before there was a lot of talk about salary, right? Mislintat had to reduce salary, new salary structure, etc., etc. So the expectation was, or at least for me, the expectation was that salary was high, would have been high, but it actually dropped from the year before that, from 109 million to 99 million. So it dropped almost 10%, which was kind of surprising. Probably had to do that most of the bonuses were related to winning the league, and because they didn't win the league, they didn't have to pay out those bonuses. But still, they are reducing the salary, so that, or at least it's more performance related. Let's put it that way. So you would expect next year even lower. It's still a lot of money, but lower than this year, depending a little bit on the results. But yeah, looking what it's now, it's probably gonna drop. But also revenue is going to drop because you'll lose a lot of European money. Last year, Ajax earned 45 million from the UEFA, including ticket sales, it was something like 54, sorry. And this year it's probably going to be around 20, 15, maybe, depends on how well they perform. So that is a direct impact on revenue. I would expect salary to be lower, but revenue would increase even more. So then you come at like the percentage of your revenue that you spend on salary is going to increase a little bit. Yeah, it looks like they've been working on that to reduce that, with the new structure.
Jose, last time we spoke, right? We were talking a lot about amortization, of course, but just park that for a bit. You also mentioned that budget is based on Champions League level, right?
Yeah.
We know that the revenues you already mentioned, we always say more or less 50 million. You said it's 45. And now we don't have that going into this season. There are two things. First, we have the European money. And then second of all, which is not part of the operational result, you mentioned that and you made it very clear. But you also said that apart from this, you have to take separately, you have to look at the transfer result. So what happens in the transfer window? Can you elaborate more on what happened last summer and how you see it and how that will benefit us maybe going into next season, or maybe not?
And maybe to start with the last, I don't think it's going to benefit that much. I mean, last transfer season, they earned a lot of money. They did great business. The transfer result was 113 million. I think it was the highest, probably it's one of the highest ever. And that's, of course, mainly due to Anthony and Martinez that were sold. And they probably account for something of in the range of maybe even 100 million of those 113 was because of those two players. So big thanks to Erik ten Hag. This year, if you look at the past summer, a lot of players have been sold, and already it looks like for this financial year, which goes until 30th of June next year, Ajax will say that they'll probably have a positive result. So that means even though a lot less money from Europe coming in, the transfer sales of this year were again quite high, not as high as last year, but again really high with three big sales, Timber, Alvarez, and Kudus. So with those three, they're already compensating for the loss in Europe. But if we look 1 year ahead, so for next year, next summer, then it's going to be a little bit harder. Because who are you going to sell? Oh, you're going to sell to get high sales, especially from a financial point. Because I'm going to say it, amortization plays a role there. Because all of those new players still have a lot of remaining amortization left. So if you sell them, even if Sutalo, an English club, will pay a lot for him, or Forbes or something like that, in the transfer result, it's not going to be that high. You really need to sell a lot of players then to get any good transfer result. So that's one of the risks that were taken this summer. A lot of new players means in one go, a lot of new players in one go means that you should be able to keep on to them for some time, especially because you don't have a lot of players from the academy at the moment that are worth a lot. That would normally be sort of the balance, right? You have some players that you can sell and they don't have any amortization because they're from your own academy, but they're not there at the moment, or at least not that many. Taylor would be, but Rensch would be one, but are you going to get a lot of money for them? That's sort of the question. So that's going to be harder next year. So that's going to be that's one of the drawbacks from buying so many players this year.
I foresee big issues. I mean, do we have some players that we can sell for huge money? I mean, we can think about a typical player like Hato, but Ajax doesn't want to sell such gems. We want to keep him, of course, for several years, and he's not ready yet to go. But it's worrisome to know that next season, if we have to sell, if we don't qualify for Europe, I'm not even thinking about Champions League anymore, but if we don't qualify for Europe, it might be that we have to sell, but we don't have anybody.
Yeah, I think what Jose is saying is very important as well. So correct me if I'm wrong with the wording, but the transfer result, the best possible scenario for Ajax is always the ones that don't have or almost don't have any amortization. So the youth players generate the most money because we don't have to take out the amortization from the money that we sell them to other clubs,
exactly.
right? So in this sense, I'm looking at players that are playing in our team. I think of Taylor, I think of Wrench, I think of Hato. And those are the only three, actually. My worry is now, when it comes, let's say, to Hato, is Ajax going to be inclined or pressured much more, because there are a lot of clubs looking at Hato. We already know that. For next year, that maybe they're going to look at him. And it gets worse when we don't play Europe next season, or we don't qualify for the Champions League. How do you guys see that?
Yeah, and I think to add on to that, there's a lot of call, or sometimes there's call, just sell a lot of players, and we need to buy new players, buy better players. But if you do this trick as well, it's maybe even a positive trick, but if you do it again next season, and even if you sell some players for and take the loss for granted, so to say, if you're going to do it again, and if you're again going to buy a lot of players, you're going to stay the same problem, right? The business model of Ajax would be have youth players, have other players that you've developed over a couple of years, and in the meantime you profit in a sport on performance from them, because they play for you a couple of years, and then you sell them and you make a profit out of that. And in the meantime, you have performance in Europe, you're a great brand, so commercially and everything's interesting, and that's all positive. But if you go the route of just buying, you're gonna hurt the business model, and that's not gonna work at a certain point. Maybe to put a little bit of a positive note on that, and that's also something that's been talked about a lot, equity. Ajax is a rich club. They've always made a lot of profit, and especially in the Overmars years and Frank de Boer years, they've been having a lot of profit. And so that means your equity, so the money that you have as a buffer, so to say, the value that you have is increasing. So to make that a little bit more concrete, the net result of Ajax last season was 39 million. So that means the operational result was a little bit, so they had a little bit more revenue than cost, and then the positive transfer balance came on top of that, and it ended up in 39 million in the plus as a profit. I think that's the third highest profit they ever had. That means that your equity grows with 39 million, right? So the equity at the moment,
earnings.
Yeah. So the equity at the moment is 237 million euro. If you look ahead, and you would say next year, we don't want to sell too many players. We want to keep Hato. We want to keep our own players, maybe sell a few and take some loss. There is a possibility for Ajax to have a loss in a year, right? So that's good transfer result. Same salary, same cost, same expenses, so to say. So you end up at a loss. That could be a possibility, right? That's why you have the buffer for bad years. And I think it's quite impressive, actually, that it didn't happen this year. Maybe they didn't have to sell Kudus, and just have a lower net result, but keep them in. That could have been an option financially then, I don't think in reality that would have worked, but financially that would have been an option for them. So that's sort of the buffer that they have for next year and after that. Yeah.
Do you know how much the buffer was, or the equity reserves in this sense, when the revolution took place?
2012 around.
That's a good question. I don't know that quickly, but I think
I'm throwing this at you. Of course, it's very difficult, but I remember the days. If we have 40 million, that I remember, but I don't know.
Yeah, that's true, because because only in the 2 Corona years there was a loss, and all of the other years there was profit. There have been profits in the 18, 19, and 16, 17 years in Europe of 40, 50 million. So, if you calculate back, you'll probably get around that number, what you said. Yeah.
So it would mean if we have like a really bad year, it is possible for Ajax to not sell our players and just to take a chunk out of the equity, which is more than 200 million, to use for investments or something like that, for transfers. That's a possibility, or is it like probably not going to be the case anyway?
The fact that you have such a high equity means that you can suffer a loss without too much trouble, right? It means in the end that it's still a healthy company, that you still have a lot of worth in your company. You're not in debt in any way. That's what it means. But it's not a pile of money of 200 million lying there and taking it and paying it to a player or something like that.
But
it just means that Ajax can keep the same structure that they have, the business model that they have. So
you can take a loss.
yeah,
You're not knocked out.
You don't have to, exactly. You don't have to sell your players to reduce salary with 10, 20, 30 million. You don't have to, you don't have to say, oh, I can't spend anything on players, stuff like that. So they can keep their business model as it is. So that's probably better to look at it like that. Yeah.
No, okay. And now understandable. But then if I look at from the side of the shareholders, if they get like a setback on because having a loss, it would mean that they want to like reduce costs to maintain like the equity, right? Because you see profits going down, and if you see profits going down or revenues is going down, you want to reduce costs to break even, so to say, and not cutting losses too much on the equity side. That will mean probably the shareholders will jump on the fact that we need to sell, right? Or at least to cut costs from somewhere.
Yeah, and I can understand what you mean, and it's true. You know, the profit that Ajax makes goes to its shareholders. Mind you, it's the operational profit that's being taken for shareholders, and of course, 73% is still in the in the hands of how you call it, the vereniging. Yeah, sorry, I'm doing Dutch here.
Yeah, it's like an association.
Like the association. Yeah, exactly. And yes, shareholders look at things like a profit, and they say, hey, I invested in this, and if you can make a profit, go for it. But on the other hand, you know, shareholders, and especially all of those that are behind the scenes at Ajax, they will sort of look at the longer term a little bit, right? I mean, if it's a good plan, if you consciously say, hey, this year we're going to keep some players, we don't want to sell them because that will mean next year we'll do better, in the longer run we'll do better. Yeah, that's the story that you know, that's how you need to sell your loss, so to say, to your shareholders. If you have a good story and if you have a good a plan, which of course at the moment, or at least now, has been hard with all the chaos in the organization side. Yes, in general, Ajax is a company on the stock market that needs to make profit. But on the other hand, yeah, if you have a good financial plan, that will get more profit in the longer run because it's a healthy company. Yeah, if you can explain it, then that's the way to go.
In summary, what you're saying, we have enough belly fat, which we created in the last few years, and things are looking in that sense good because we are able to sustain, like a year that's not going so well. Whether we have pressure to sell, yes or no, we can, if possible, we want to keep players because of our sporting success that we want to reach. We might be able for one transfer window, a summer or something, to say, you know what, we're not going to sell our best players, we'll keep them. But then that also means we cannot do a lot in the transfer window as well.
Yeah, true. That's sort of true. And maybe to add to that, Ajax is showing really good commercial success. You know, so merchandise, business seats, stuff like that. Even though the last season wasn't on the sporting side wasn't that good, they still had a good commercial success, which is a good foundation. But all of these things, all that we're saying, even though Ajax is financially healthy and doing well financially, doing well commercially, you have to keep the sporting side and the results there, right? Because if you don't perform, everything sort of crumbles down in the end. And I saw Tom Knipping from Football International making the comparison to Manchester United, who have financially are still in the top, but sportingly not that much anymore. You don't want to go that way, right? So then it's all about the money and yeah. So for now, it's okay and it's not too bad. So kudos sort of to the financial department and the commercial department. But we need some results sooner or later. Yeah.
At least somebody's winning, right? Now the finance department, not the not the sporting club. But from what I hear now, I mean, it seems like expectation will be that youth players will get a shot because they are the lifeline of our club. I mean, there is no amortization, as you said, and we need to bring in these kind of players to be more healthy, to make more profit in upcoming years.
Yeah, and it's also part of the Ajax identity, right? That you have young players that perform, And yeah, we've bought some players that have the potential, sort of should have the potential to become more worth more in the longer run, right? So a lot of the players that were bought were still quite young. They have some potential in there, so it's sort of good fit, but yeah, it needs a stable organization as well, with someone who draws plans for the longer run, and that's the real issue at the moment, right?
Yeah, it starts at the top.
One of the things, though, is that in the recent months, since we spoke, Jose, there have been a lot of announcement on youth players being signed. So
Sure.
That's a positive thing. We have to look at how good they will become, but that's a good sign already. I have one more question from my side, to be honest. I remember last time we spoke as well, there was this magic number, more or less 60 million, 60. And that was it at the amortization? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Can you tell us what the financial results told us now?
It was a little bit below that, actually. It was 56 million. So that was a little bit surprising as well. We would have expected that, with all the spending and on players that were done by Hamstra and Huntelaar, and then with, of course, the agent that was involved, you would have expected that to rise a little bit, but actually it wasn't that bad. So yeah, but probably also has a little bit to do with not have to pay out bonuses, because a player has a minimum number and some performance bonuses related, so probably there's something there, but it wasn't too bad. Probably this year's going to be higher.
Any questions, Sabi?
No, man, it's quite clear. I mean, he's financially, we're doing well, so at least some positive news in this regard. And yeah, I mean, we'll just have to wait for our sporting success, which can take a long time.